Okay, wow, that light is bright in the background. Let's see if I can fix that. Okay, so I haven't been around for a while. And it's just because it's the imminent birth of my spawn. I shouldn't say that. I'm always not going to like that term. Uh, our son's due in like a very short amount of time. And I also got like kind of sick for a while and then got better. So you've probably noticed that now the Twitch stream says that these live reads are going to be pretty much whenever I have the time and energy. And I really wanted to get one up today. So I'm going to read chapter 24 from The Sword. And I'll post that and I'll try to get it up on YouTube as soon as possible. And then I don't know when the next one will be. Because the due date is September 7th, but it's entirely possible that we're going to go way before or way after. I guess not way before, it's not that far off. Also, my job, which is teaching, has started up this week. Yeah. So anyway, I've got a lot going on, but I wanted to make sure I got a live read. So I'm going to get chapter 24 done right now for The Sword, and I'll give you all the ways to get in touch with me after reading it. Oh yeah, recapping where we left off last time. In the previous chapter, we learned that Lena Engrove, the paramour of Logan Ongodaeus, Arvadis' younger son, did in fact have a child that is Logan's child, and named him after his father. Arvadis discovers this in the chapter, as does Varasho, who did not know, even though Varasho is the one responsible for sending Logan away. He never knew that Lena was pregnant or had a child from his brother's, that is his brother's son. So that's the big kind of reveal. Then we're going to jump now into this chapter back to Logan and the rest after they have escaped Delmore. The younger son of Arvadis was not thinking of home or his father at that moment. He was attempting to urge onward a large mass of refugees to the mysterious passage of Kronakarl, a destination about which he knew nothing. Diaga's fear of the place had sparked doubts in both he and Grimtooth, but they had no choice in the matter now. The knight rode up and down the line of wagons, urging the men and women, driving them to hurry forward. We must reach the entrance before dark. Quickly now. Grimtooth trotted up beside him on Thunder and grunted. Why you be telling everyone to get moving before dark? Logan slowed and met his gaze. Do you remember what happened when night fell at the inn? Those strange shades came among us. Joven is, for all practical purposes, unconscious since he, Trem, and the Napoleon returned, and Diaga has been wielding magic all day. Neither is fit to fight. If we don't reach the caverns before these things catch us, then we'll be defenseless against them. What makes you so sure they'd be with that army? I'm not sure, but can you think of anyone else that would be serving around here if they did have a master? And has there been a more opportune time to strike us than the one we are in now? That quieted the orc, and he rode back down the line to check the others. Trem had been laid out in a cart along with Jovanna Leth, who was receiving some medical attention from Diaga. The mage had used some minor spells to slow his bleeding and was now resorting to old-fashioned stitchwork to finish the job. Joven had been roused from his exhausted slumber, and now leaned against the wagon wall as Diaga worked swiftly, grimacing in pain as the needle went deftly in and out of his skin. Grimtooth matched their pace beside the cart. How are you, Jovanna Leth? Feeling livelier? Joven managed to smile before replying. A bit, Grimtooth, thanks. The orc gave a huge and comical wink. I'll see if I can find you some water. He rode off, leaving the two younger men in Neep, who was never far from Diaga in the cart. The firecat was curled up on Diaga's feet protectively, apparently sleeping, but every movement Joven made brought her head up sharply, and her strange paws stole to her weapons when she did so. Each time the young wizard would stroke her ears and softly tell her all was well, and she would return to semi-slumber. Battered but alive, Joven looked down at Trem, who had fallen asleep suddenly during his return ride to join the others. What made him come back, do you suppose? Before Diaga could answer, a gruff voice came from in front of their cart. No mystery to that, boy. That madman of a half-elf seems to think he owes you his allegiance. Me? I was all for leaving these people behind and worrying about ourselves, but it seems he's more foolish than I thought him. Diaga said softly. Foolish enough to not abandon those in need, you mean? Ghost shot the wizard a look of cold hatred and moved further forward. Joven watched him go and asked, Is it true, Diaga? Ghost really betrayed his people? Diaga looked up from his stitching. Ghost did not betray his people, but Greymane Squall certainly did. I spent a great deal of my time as an orphan in Nepal City, and I remember hearing stories of him. For a time of relative peace, Greymane Squall was a military legend, the greatest commander of his age. Yet when the invaders came, he opened the gates of the city and let them in. He regrets his decision, I know, but such an act is difficult to forget and perhaps impossible to forgive. It's fueled his quest for revenge, but it seems he has not rediscovered his humanity along the way. Jovanna Leth took this in thoughtfully. Do you think that this item he seeks in Southron has something to do with the invaders of Nepal? or those broken that attacked Delmore. He claimed as much before we reached the town. Diaga went back to the stitching. On that matter, I'm fairly certain he speaks the truth. Neep, the firecat growled. Diaga smiled slightly and translated for Joven. Neep does not trust him. Nor do I, yet he did save my life, and Trem's. Diaga looked up once more. Yes, but understand this. Ghost did it so because he recognized Trem's potential in Guayaquil and wants to keep him around. He'll do only what's necessary to ensure Trem sticks with him, even if it means he has to pull him clear of a lost battlefield. But Ghost saved all of us, not just Trem. You really think he's beyond all redemption? No, Javanaleth, he's not. But he's a man who sees life and death as calculations to be made. Only one thing motivated the former Thane of House Squall, and it is not the preservation of any of our lives. Joven could not think of how to respond. They rode in silence a while longer, with Diaga working away on his leg. The spear had pierced deep, but Diaga had managed to repair some of the damage of this magic, at least slowing the flow of blood enough to keep Joven clear of the danger of bleeding out. In the wagon behind them, Joseph was not so lucky. His wounds were severe, and Diaga feared he did not have the power to overcome them. Even Caliandra had shaken her head sadly when she saw the old man. She'd done her best to make him comfortable, but that was all she could do. Diaga and Javanaleth sat back, the stitching complete, and watched Trem as he lay near them, still as death, but with moving lips. Joven looked at Diaga askance. What is he doing? Diaga glanced at the ranger from Bladeholm and leaned towards Trem. He paused, looking confused, and said, He's arguing with someone. As soon as he had left the sight of Delmore behind, Trem had been taken by a growing suspicion that gnawed deeper and deeper into his mind, until he became convinced that it was more than just paranoia that caused him to wonder. The warning from Garand Oakheart had seemed so contrary at the time, disparate from his first meeting when he had spoken of life without others as a life not worth living. Why, then, would such a man tell him to abandon those who would not simply pass Delmore and her plight by? Trem had sat behind Ghost on Karok and slowly become convinced of one thing. He had been deceived in some way. Upon reaching the others, he had insisted he needed to rest and been placed in the same cart as Javanaleth and Diaga. Almost immediately, he had lain down and begun concentrating on drifting away from the world about him, soon passing into an unnatural sleep that was brought on by his need. Instantly, he sought the dreamscape, his need growing so rapidly that he drew on a great reserve of memory and emotion that he'd never found before. The world formed and deformed swiftly about him, but he ignored the immaterial nature of it and drove his will to find Garand Oakheart, or whatever being had laid claim to being him. Trem felt the outside presence take him and did not fight it. He careened backward in time, flying to the battlefield of his past. This was not Delmore, though the images were hauntingly similar. Trem swept over the bodies, the blood and flame of hateful combat, and took it in calmly. This was gone, over, and done with. Trem held on to reality, that he was no longer here, and the past was beyond his control. The vision took him down to the field and slowed, reaching the body of one man in particular. Trem was released, felt his feet touch the ground. He knelt slowly, studying the massive frame, the heavy armor. Bull the warrior lay dead before him, a strange and unnatural smile on his face. Trem had been here when he passed on, remembered their final conversation vividly, and knew this was some foul caricature. Despite himself, he let the deep sadness creep in, the scene before him sharper and clearer than his own memories of the moment. Trem was jerked from this place to another, similar memory. Now he was within the fortress, climbing the wall to the parapet. The wind throws back his cloak as he ascends the stairs to the curtain wall, revealing a fully solid frame, but one that moves with eerie grace. The long, dirty blonde hair is swept back, revealing a face as of marble, shorter curling hairs flowing in the wind, slightly obscuring silvery gray eyes. He pauses to shield his vision against the biting cold on the wind. As the army waits below him, an enemy he knows the knights cannot hope to defeat. The memory broke then, and Trem was back in the field outside the fortress. Trem glanced about him and was slightly alarmed to see that there were no men near him, no castle, nothing. It was as though he stood in emptiness. Trem's senses suddenly came back to him, and he refocused on the thing he sought. None of this was happening now. He had been in Delmore with Joven and the others, and he was now on his way to Southron. He looked down at the sword in his hand, the sword of Vakhtun el-Vak, and it felt real. Everything had been incredibly real. Find the one. He needed to seek out the imposter, for he was sure now he had been an imposter, and that he had worn the face and voice of Garand Oakheart. In his need he spoke. Where are you? Show yourself. As you wish. Trem turned slowly, recognizing the voice, knowing it far too well, for he had heard it long ago at the fortress of Aves. Standing a few feet behind him was a gaunt form in silken black robes. Pale, almost translucent skin covered a drawn face with burning eyes. A long head of jet-black hair seemed to meld into the robes, covering a thin but substantial set of shoulders. A crown, steel and silver, spiked with black iron thorns, rested atop the figure's head. Trem recognized him immediately, in all his grandeur. Neroth. The god moved towards him slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. The god of death took in the mortal before him with searching eyes. Then he spoke again, and the voice was soft and almost soothing. You've allowed yourself to come back to this place. How interesting. Trem did not move. It's just a dream. Neroth shot him a look. Is it? Trem shifted uncomfortably. Why are you here? Neroth turned slightly and looked outward at the empty horizon. I'm here to check on the progress of Curven's child, that and to see what you've decided to do. What do you mean? Is it you that impersonated Garrett Oakhart and told me to abandon the others in Delmore? Naroth ignored Trem's demanding tone. When you left the Fortress of Aves, you went into seclusion deep into Silverleaf Forest. That was over 30 years ago, and you've not wielded a blade since. Why then did you go to Gylakill and on to Delmore? Trem kept his eyes locked on the god, probing for reasons behind the question. I came out of my seclusion to help a young man who needed it. Naroth crossed his arms and turned to face Trem. But you yourself do not believe you can help people. You've said as much in the whispers in the dark night. Something more selfish drives you out of your solitude and into my path again. Trem regarded the god angrily. You make it sound as though I've intentionally opposed you all my life. Naroth chuckled darkly. Perhaps not knowingly, but you certainly have been a thorn in my side several times. I could use you, Trem. Oh, I know the others you travel with want you to believe my army to the north is a threat to be destroyed, but they are too quick to trust the deceptions of my former wife. I had hoped you would be wise enough to see past the simplistic interpretation of such minor events. Events like the torching of villages and murder of innocents? There are going to be casualties. Naroth held up a hand to stave off Trem's protestations. You must recognize the greater purpose of my actions. Did you impersonate Garrett Oakhart to prevent my death in Delmore? Naroth became enraged then, moving towards Trem threateningly. You do not understand, boy. Wasting my time with these matters that are not of consequence. Steps must be taken to bring people of Teftinir back from the brink of their own self-destruction. The god's face softened somewhat, and he looked slightly haggard. A price must be paid by all. It's not as if you possess the strictest creed when it comes to the sanctity of innocent life. Did you impersonate Garrett Oakhart? Trem repeated. Naroth looked as though he would strike the mortal, but then he relaxed. I did not. And it matters not who, if anyone, did. You need to stop fretting over the minor events of your world. I wish to work with you, not against you. Perhaps you do. Trem's resolve seemed to waver, but then he remained firm. Nevertheless, I am not going to stand with you. No, in fact, I deny you. Deny me? Naroth laughed madly. All you mortals have denied the gods. Our world you've altered and tainted with selfish desires, forgetting from whom the very gift of your existence came. You've grown proud and trusting in your own hands and crafts. Fools. The dread god reached out and grabbed Trem's collar, pulling him in, and the scent of death poured from his mouth. You truly want to know who told you to pass Delmore by? Who tried to save you from almost certain death? It was not I, but the words could have as easily come from my lips. You and those with you waste your time dealing with small matters when the greater, unimaginable doom of us all sits on the thin edges of our worlds. Trem could not feel the killing cold in the grasp of Naroth, only the burning hatred in his own heart for the deity before him. Reaching out, he grasped the corpse-like hand and wrenched it free of him. Naroth stepped back, and his eyes widened in shock as the half-elf stretched outward and pulled the god in as close as he had the mortal. Plan your charred future all you want, god of death. Think of every devious punishment for me you can, because if you come for the survivors of Delmore and my friends, I'll be waiting for you. Trem released him and stepped back. Naroth was stock still, taking in the strength of his defiance, still unable to fathom the sheer gall of the lesser being before him. Trem gestured where the fortress of his dream had stood, with the phantasm of the sword he had taken from Vakhtyn el-Vak. I walked away from my duty once. I shall not do it again. Saying this, he saluted Naroth, the salute of the Eagle Knights, sword tipped to head, and kissing the pommel, he lowered the blade. Turning, he walked off into nothingness, fading from sight with each step, but Naroth's furious words followed him like the frigid wind on the battlements of Aves. Deny me, then, but my servants are coming, and they will show you and those you travel with no mercy. Trem's eyes opened into the soft rain. He lay in the cart amid the hay, feeling the gentle rhythm of its motion as he was pulled down the road towards their destination. He could see Javaneleth and Diaga talking softly near him, but he closed his eyes again and feigned sleep so as to avoid speaking right away. He found he was not comforted to know that the warning he had been given about Delmore had been a deception. Yet it was a kindness to know Garrett Oakhart had not been a part of the lie. But it was not pleasant to dwell on how quickly after the departure from Silverleaf the god of death, or his agents, had begun hounding Trem. He put from his mind the warning and threat of Naroth's broader message. The deity had let slip in his frustration that they were still being hunted, and Trem knew he had to tell the others. Before he could bring himself to do so, he first attempted to eavesdrop on Diaga and Jovan's conversation. Trem understood they would welcome him back into the group for now, but there were misgivings that would need to be addressed. He would have to answer for his abandonment of the others, and while Javaneleth might be willing to accept a change of heart, Trem very much doubted Logan would. Though they were once again together, it was as they had been in Gylakill. It was the same necessity of survival that bound them now as it had then. The fracturing of values and beliefs might be too much to overcome, and Trem knew he would be faced with deciding between the practical satisfaction of Ghost's need for revenge and the nobler selflessness of Logan's sense of duty to the greater mortal world. But for the moment, there were more pressing issues at hand. Trem believed Naroth when he said that there were enemies after them all. It could be that the Broken had sent a small unit to chase them down, but Trem suspected something far more sinister. The shades that had struck at Gylakill had been deadly and single-minded, and he believed that they were more apt to be chosen for a mission of extermination. The companions did not have the manpower to withstand them if they did indeed come. Diaga was likely weakened from the battle at Delmore, and his magic, if present at all, would be limited. Trem was the only one in possession of an enchanted weapon strong enough to harm the creatures, but he could not hope to defeat more than one of them in combat. Their numbers and unearthly, jolting movements would overwhelm him. He opened his eyes and glanced at the sky. It was dusk already, and he needed to come up with a plan swiftly, or they were all going to die. Trem rose abruptly, and immediately Joven was beside him, helping him up. Trem met the young man's eyes and said softly, "I should think I need to help you, not the other way round." Joven averted his gaze. "You've already done enough." Trem shook his head emphatically. "No, I ran away. I fled your side when I should have stayed to protect you. I am sorry, Javanaleth." Joven accepted this cautiously. "Joseph told me some things that might explain why you left, but maybe someday you can tell me yourself." "Someday, yes, maybe," Trem said offhandedly. "But we need to get moving. I believe the dark-robed fiends from Gylakil are coming after us. We have to get into the caverns before they reach the caravan." "How do you know they're after us?" Trem shot him a warning look. "I just know." Joven said nothing. The two turned to stare behind them as hooves approached. Logan and Grimtooth rode up from their rear and hailed them. Logan slowed down to the cart's pace, glancing only briefly at Trem, and spoke. "The army stopped its pursuit. Apparently we frightened them off." He looked at Joven. "How are you, Prince of the Blade?" "I'll live." "Glad to hear it." Trem spoke up. "We have a problem." Logan looked at him, and Joven threw support behind his fellow half-elf. "Trem believes the Shades are after us again, the same ones that attacked us at the end of the Four Winds." "Ach, how does he know that?" All three looked at Trem, and he sighed in expectation of their disbelief. "I saw it in a dream." Logan's eyes widened quizzically. "I know that sounds like what that sounds like, but you must believe me. They're coming, or something as deadly, at least, is on our heels." Logan stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "I admit I had the same fear, though it was a danger I reasoned out, not brought to me in my sleep. No matter. If this is true, then we are in grave danger, and cannot chance ignoring the possibility they are indeed hunting us. Grimtooth, find Gend. Ask him how far we are from the caves of his." The orc rode forward swiftly, and Logan turned to Trem. "Can you fight?" "Yes, but I can't hope to handle more than a few of them. At this point, I don't even know I could defeat one on my own." "Perhaps you were mistaken in the dream of yours." Trem shook his head emphatically. Logan glanced back over his shoulder and rubbed his chin in frustration. "These things will catch up to us when the other wagons with the wounded first, since they're traveling the slowest. If we're near the caves, we might get half people in before it gets totally dark, but I don't know that we should count on that. We have to make a stand somewhere." "We don't need to do anything. I can delay them as long as I can." Joven looked at Trem reproachfully, but Logan spoke first. "As noble an offer as that may be, you can't hope to stop them for very long, as you yourself admitted, so you'll need us with you." Trem shook his head. "You don't have the weapons necessary to fight them. It'd be a slaughter. Be that as it may, you're not going by yourself." Joven nodded emphatically, and Trem threw up his hands. "Fine, might as well all die together rather than alone." Diaga appeared suddenly, standing beside the wagon carrying Joven and Trem. Keeping pace on foot easily, he spoke quietly. "Trem, I'm afraid I need you for a moment. Joseph's awake, but I don't think he'll live much longer." Trem looked at Diaga in shock and jumped down from the cart with surprising spryness. "Where is he?" Without answering, Diaga began walking to the front of the caravan, shadowed by Neep. Joven eased himself down from the cart gingerly, and Trem paused to assist him. Leaning on Trem, Javanaleth hobbled along with him. Logan rode forward to find Ghost and the others and learn how far they were from the entrance to the passage. Trem kept his eyes ahead of the ragged robes of Diaga. The rain was slowing somewhat, but it was rapidly darkening about them. He hadn't much time, but he needed to see Joseph. If he indeed was dying, then Trem had little time to say things he should have said long ago. Diaga hopped onto the end of one of the carts. Caliandra was there with two children. The mage spoke softly to her, and they shifted down one end of the cart as Neep climbed swiftly and silently up after the wizard and stationed herself on guard. Trem boosted Joven into the wagon, then hauled himself up. He almost missed Joseph entirely. He was lying at the end of the cart they had climbed onto, his head resting on some burlap sacks near Trem's soft deerskin boots. The old man looked terribly thin and small lying before him, and Trem choked back tears seeing the blood-soaked blanket covering what was surely a broken body. Diaga leaned in and whispered, "I'm sorry, Trem, but his wounds went far beyond my or Caliandra's skill to heal. It simply isn't my area of expertise, but I think we've made him comfortable." Trem patted the youth's shoulder and managed a sad smile. "You did your best, I'm sure, Diaga. Is he awake?" "I'm awake, lad," Joseph gasped, or so it seemed. His voice had a terrible wheezing sound to it. "You came back. Saved my home, you did." Trem knelt beside the old man and gently rolled his head to one side so he could look into his eyes. "I saved no one, Joseph. I left you behind. I'm sorry." Joseph smiled. "You remembered my name. I was afraid you'd forgotten it, but then I suppose you've forgotten very little about me." Trem didn't answer. He simply swallowed with difficulty and nodded. Joseph took a shuddering breath and continued. "What happened so long ago? It was not your fault. You tried to help. Do not let failures of the past deter you from hope for the future. Do not give in to fear and doubt." You, Joseph lifted his head slightly with a last great effort. You can do much for the world. I don't understand what you are or how you've remained the same for so long, but I've seen good in you. Don't abandon those in need. Use your strength to help them. I know I'm dying. I accepted this, and I hope that what I've done in my later years may absolve me from the sins of my past. I have done evil, Trem, evil through indifference to the suffering of others. Don't fall into the same trap I once did. Trem wiped his eyes. You stood by Javanaleth when I would not. You saved his life many times today. Consider your conscience clear. Joseph seemed at ease. I'm leaving soon, Trem. Please sit with me a while. I'd like to stare in your eyes while I go. It seems I can see where I'm going already. Trem sat with Joseph, holding his hand until it was stiff and cold. Slowly he reached out his free arm and closed the dead man's eyes, which still looked unseeingly into his own. It had not been long. Joseph had passed quickly and quietly. Trem kissed his forehead gently. At least one of us found peace. Looking up, he saw Diaga watching him. The mage came over slowly and covered Joseph's face with the blanket. He said nothing but sat quietly next to Trem and watched the stiff bundle for a while. Trem sat with his head in his hands, trying to cope with the pain and finding it more overpowering than he had expected. Diaga looked up when he felt a tug at his sleeve. Looking down, he saw Samuel, holding Cole, staring at him. Is he dead? Diaga felt his heart sink to his knees. Yes, Samuel, I'm afraid he is. Samuel looked at the blanket and nodded. He was a nice man. He used to cook stew for me and Cole. Trem looked up from his hands at the brown-haired boy and smiled with real affection. You're right, child. He was a very nice man. Diaga picked up Samuel and set him on his knee. Trem, this is Samuel Jovian. Samuel, meet my friend Trem. The boy said quietly, Hello, Mr. Trem. Trem laughed heartily at the boy's formality. Hello, Samuel. You're a lovely child, do you know that? Both Diaga and Trem laughed, and the boy nodded emphatically. Trem continued to talk to the youth a while and noticed another boy next to him, watching the three talk. And who's this? Diaga looked down and smiled. Ah, this is Nawandel. He's a friend of Samuel's. Trem nodded and waved. Nawandel did not respond. He simply looked at Trem with overly big brown eyes. The boy was about Samuel's age and size, but his stare seemed much older to Trem. He had shockingly dark black hair that hung to the middle of his back. His body was slim, and his bones seemed much more pronounced than usual for a young boy. Then Trem caught sight of the ear tips protruding through the nest of black hair and said softly to Diaga, He's Elven. Diaga nodded, set Samuel down, and the two boys moved back to the other end of the wagon, where Caliandra held both of them, talking quietly. Yes, he was found in the woods by one of the men from the town. They don't know where he's from. All he's ever told them is his name. Trem looked quizzically at Diaga. And this priestess Vendoth, who is she? Diaga flushed despite himself as he stammered. Oh, just a kind soul who took up her calling in Delmore. She adopted the both of them. Samuel's parents were killed during the earlier broken attacks. Trem pressed on mischievously. Does she have a name? What else did you learn about her? Diaga caught his look and shifted uncomfortably. Her name's Caliandra. I spoke to her a bit. She's about my age. His mouth opened and shut, but he could not seem to find further purpose to his speech. Trem laughed and patted the mage in the back. Well, I wouldn't worry. The boys seem to like you. I'm sure you'll see more of her after today. Yes, if we make it through the day. I'll think of something. Diaga looked at him, surprised. You tell us these spectral, possibly undead or otherwise immortal beings are following us, because you saw it in a dream. Then point out we have the necessary skills to deal with them. And against those odds, your solution is you're going to think of something? Trem shrugged. Well, I'm glad you're suddenly so confident. It's not that I'm confident. Trem grew deathly serious again. Joseph gave his life to that town. So did many other men I never even got to know, and he asked me to save them for him. Those children, the women, the others who survived, I'm not going to let something happen to them. Joseph already paid high enough a price. Diaga nodded in support. Nevertheless, we're in a precarious position. I've been in worse. Joven hobbled to the end of the wagon, briefly glancing at the body of Joseph under the blanket. He murmured, It's getting dark. Where are the others? As he spoke, Grimtooth, Logan, Wrath, and Ghost rode up to the wagon. They were all checking their weapons and shifting in saddles as though itching for something to happen. Trem noticed Wrath toying with what looked like a vicious crossbow that matched the black color of his robes and hood. He glanced at Logan, who said, Gend has reached the entrance to the passage of Chronocarl and says it will be open momentarily. He'll lead the people inside, along with the carts and the animals. Apparently it's quite wide at the entrance, and most of the way through, since it was once intended as a trade road through the Sunteeth Mountains. Still, it's going to take almost an hour to get them all beyond the doorway, and we might be dealing with the shades by then. Ghost snorted. This is ridiculous. Why would they be here? Joven shot him a look. I thought you said they were going to follow you everywhere. Ghost didn't have an answer for that, so he remained quiet. Logan cleared his throat before saying, Given the situation, we don't stand much of a chance. We can't harm them with simple steel, and only Trem possesses a blade capable of injuring them. However, it seems Wrath may have an alternative. They all turned in surprise to the dark-cloaked man sitting silently in the shadows of his black cloth. Wrath glanced at his audience, and then removed a vial from the folds of his robe. It glowed with a strange aura as he held it up. These beings, I know of their kind. You call them shades, and that is true, but your understanding of their nature is incomplete. This will allow us to fend off the creatures. Diaga leaned forward. What is it? Wrath eyed him distrustfully. A treasure from my homeland. It's not for outsiders. Where is your home, Wrath? Trem said with piercing calm. The roadman caught his look and held it steadily, but did not respond. Again, Logan broke the awkward silence by clearing his throat. It is, unfortunate though it may be, our only chance. There's no way we can kill these things, so we have to trust to Wrath's artifact, as it will drive them off long enough for us to escape. I have to be close to them, Wrath said softly. You'll need to distract them for a short time. The only way we can buy enough time is if we engage them. Logan made the pronouncement with reserved finality. Some of us are wounded. If you don't think you have the strength to fight and run, then you should get the people inside the caverns. Joven stood up straighter. I'm staying with you. Diaga leaned on his staff and nodded emphatically. As am I. Logan nodded at both of them. Then let's move north. No horses. We're going to catch them off guard. Trem spoke up, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. I think I might have a plan. The others leaned in to listen. So that's chapter 24. And hopefully later this week I will get chapter 25 posted as well. If you're still catching up with these, thank you for listening, subscribing. You can follow me at Legacy Chronicle on Twitter, and you can also find the videos on YouTube under VultureX21, the same handle used for the Twitch page. Thanks.